My dad used to tell me a story from when he was a teenager, hunting with my grandpa. They used to live in southern Idaho. One summer, they had camped down in the valley and planned to hike up in the hills early the next morning. This was the kind of place where they didn't expect to see another human being for miles. Early morning came, and they set out into the hills a few hours before sunrise. Neither used the flashlight because their eyes had adjusted to the moonlight. As they were climbing the hill, my dad turned around to take a look at the valley of brush below them and their campsite in the distance. This is when he noticed several red lights moving quickly across the valley, several feet off the ground, heading towards their camp. At first, he thought it could be a plane, but there were dozens of them, and they were randomly moving like a flock of birds and made no sound. This was back in the 80s, so drones aren't a thing. Dad was about to shout in alarm when my grandpa barked at him to keep moving. Grandpa's not the kind of man you disobey, so Dad kept moving. A few minutes later, Grandpa stops and has the two of them crawl into a bush that provided a good covered position to look into the valley. Turns out Gramps had seen the lights moving about way back when they were still at camp and wanted to get some distance between them. They pulled out some binoculars and tried to get a better look, but didn't come up with much. They moved faster than birds and seemed to be just glowing balls of red light with no discernible features. Over time, it seemed obvious that they had been hanging out in the sky right above their campsite and continued to circle it for quite a while. Dad and Grandpa stayed there watching them, not saying a word. Eventually, the sun began to rise over the horizon, and as it began to touch the valley floor, Dad's ears were blasted by an extremely loud and high-pitched sound that seemed to have come from the flying objects. When the noise eventually stopped, the objects began to rise higher into the air and headed up into the mountains in the opposite direction from their hiding spot. After a while, they returned to the camp and found it absolutely trashed. Nothing was stolen, and it didn't seem like their food was eaten either, so they don't think it was bandits or animals who did it. All they know is that those lights scared the hell out of them, and neither went back there again. I was hiking a section of the North Umpqua River, northern part of southern Oregon, a few years back with my sister-in-law. It's a 72-mile trail broken into sections that can be easily hiked in a day. At the time, I lived about midway up the trail, fairly remote in a small community. It was mid-fall this one day when we set out. The trail was running along the south side of the Umpqua River and was pretty up and down in the beginning. We made it to the fairly flat section. It was running just above the river. There was this beautiful view of the river through the trees, so we stopped to get some pictures and take a water break. I immediately felt extremely uncomfortable, like someone was watching us. I slowly turned my head to look behind us across the trail and up a very small incline. Through the trees I could see a small meadow. Across the meadow, maybe 15 yards from us, was a tent, an old canvas-style tent. As I'm looking, I noticed bones strung from the trees all around the meadow, like creepy death wind chimes. My stomach just clenched and dropped. I leaned into Sil and whispered, "Do not turn around and look behind us. Just continue walking up the trail and run when I tell you to." We were close enough to the river that nobody not right next to us could have heard this. She did exactly as I told her to, setting off at the brisk walk we'd been at before. We got maybe 10 yards, and I could hear footsteps through the forest floor, coming from behind and slightly above us. That part of the forest is very dense. There is a thick moss cover under the trees, so footsteps on it make a very specific sound. I leaned forward and told her to pick up her speed. She did. I did, and so did whoever was behind us. I leaned forward again and told her to run as fast as she could and not stop until I told her to. For two middle-aged women, both slightly overweight, we ran like the damn wind. I just kept telling her, "Go, go, go." I could see ahead of us that the trail made an incline and veered to the right along the river and around the cliff. I knew at that point that whoever it was going to have to come down on the trail or stop. We kept running. We probably ran at least a mile after that, even though we could no longer hear anyone behind or above us. The section of the trail was about 9 miles, and we were not halfway when this happened. We eventually slowed down, but just hurried as fast as we could the rest of the way. We had arranged for her younger brother, who's not my ex by the way, to pick us up. We made it to the next trailhead fairly early, so we made our way out to 138 and started walking east towards home, knowing he'd find us. He did, and was shocked at our story. We got home and immediately called our local sheriff, who lived just above us at the ranger station. He came to the house and heard our story. He explained it might be a day or two before they could get in on the trail, as they had a missing hunter at the time they were searching for. So a few days go by, and he shows up at our house to let me know that we were not crazy or imagining things, and someone did really chase us that day. I asked what they found and who it was. He looked down at the ground and then looked up and said, "I'm not going to tell you what I found or who it was, because if I do, you will never hike anywhere again. What we found was not normal and will not happen up here again." He then instructed me to never ever hike unarmed again. I never found out what they found or who it was. I never hiked that section of trail again, and it completely burnt last year. I also never hiked unarmed ever again. That was huge for me, as I was not a gun person. I had many incidents living up there in the national forest with wild animals and other strange things, but nothing ever scared me as much as that day. I was camping up in Heber, Arizona with my brothers and my dad. I was 15 or so at the time, and we were deep in the woods, far from other camps. Me and my brothers had our own tent, while our dad had a separate one, just a bit far off from us. He likes to give us our privacy while we were camping. We would usually run around the bed at night before going to bed, entering our camp to sleep at about 11 p.m. One night, we were playing hide and seek when we heard a branch snap a few yards from us. We assumed it was an elk or something, since they were pretty common in our area. We would typically go to our tent if we saw one, in hopes of not agitating it. So that's what we did. I then called for my youngest brother who was still hiding, and he revealed himself to be hiding behind a branch pile, not super far from where the noise originated. We went to the tent, and I decided since it was already pretty late that we should go to sleep. The next morning I went to check the spot for elk prints, since I found them pretty fascinating. Instead, I found large cat prints. I knew they were cat prints because they had 4 toe pads and the large center pad as well as no claw marks. I was honestly kind of excited. I had always wanted to see a mountain lion or a bobcat in the wild, but it never happened. Knowing that I was that close to either one was very thrilling. It then occurred to me that my youngest brother was hiding separated from us, scaly close to the paw print's location. It occurred to me that it was a hungry mountain lion and it had taken notice of my 6-year-old brother hiding alone. It could have possibly taken the chance. We stopped doing hide and seek at night to avoid those types of situations, and we actually set up a roll call system to ensure everyone was together at night. Now I know a mountain lion likely wouldn't have done anything had it seen him, but still, the risk felt real, and I worried that had I not heard it, I could have lost my brother. I lived near Lake of the Woods in northwestern Ontario. This one time, a friend and I were mountain biking on a hot August day when we ended up on a trail in the bush, where there is an old abandoned car graveyard. Nothing too scary. It's pretty normal for people to scrap their cars in the bush around here, so we carry on. Buddy and I are excited to explore the area because there are a lot of interesting vehicles and parts to build jumps with. We ended up sticking around for about an hour or two until dusk was starting to set in when we came across the black 1950 Buick Roadmaster that looked like it got halfway through restoration. That's when we realized that something was sort of off about this place. There were no properties near the spot for miles, and it was very strange that someone would abandon such a beautiful car halfway through a repair. Now alarm bells were ringing, but only a little so we carried on. As we were pretty beat from all the riding we were doing that day, we decided to find a place to rest, and walked a little more into the trail towards a small dirt pile, when we immediately realized that something was definitely wrong. The place was littered with animal bones from different animals. There were deer skulls, rabbits, dogs, and what looked like fallen bones. I'm starting to feel a little sick to my stomach, but my buddy seems unfazed by it. I can't tell if he's braver of the two of us or less intelligent at this point, because I keep telling him with increasing urgency that we need to get on our bikes and get the hell out of here. He tells me I shouldn't worry and tries to rationalize it by saying that it was some hunter illegally dumping here, despite the canine bones. He walked to the other side of the dirt pile, turned around ghost white and said, "We need to get the hell out of here now." I managed to peek around and caught a glimpse of what was on the other side.